So welcome to the Tuesday Night Talk. I'm your host, Elizabeth. And as many of you may know, we have a wonderful series of lectures being given by Sister Denise Lawrence. She has over 45 years experience as a Raj Yoga meditation teacher, and she has produced many TV programs. She's an author. So actually, that's a lovely segue into the topic, to love or be loved. And the question is, which is more essential? So Sister Denise will go into the depths of this, and I know you will think about love in a whole new way that can free you. So please welcome Sister Denise.
Elizabeth, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Welcome to everyone. Hello, everyone. So, it's such an awkward thing to have to decide, is it better to love or be loved? So I think I would prefer to talk about to love and be loved. I think that the reality is that everyone wants to be loved. Then we see that this word want indicates desire. And in spiritual language, we can say that as soon as you get the word desire, it's like, ooh, we're not supposed to desire things. So maybe it's not a desire, maybe it's a need. If you look at a newborn child, it's an absolute need. That child must be loved and cared for and provided for, but there's this energy of love, especially from the mother to the child, that actually gives the child the sense of their value. And so to be loved is absolutely essential. And as we grow, we continue to benefit from being loved, because being loved means there's guidance, there's structure, there's consistency, there is a certain amount of predictability. There's always unexpected things, but if you grow up in an atmosphere of love and you know that no matter what goes on, you are loved, you are valued, you are important in the eyes of your carers, then this is a very, very important foundation. Yet there are many who do not get that. And far too many do not get that. And so this creates a wound in the soul, a gap, a missing dimension of life, which then impacts you for the entire rest of your life. And so we need to look at that, because there are going to be a lot of people who are coming to this subject with that. And so there is this thing inside, which is, I need to be loved. I want to be loved. Sometimes if a person hasn't received healthy love, then you actually block it when it comes your way, because as you grow in an atmosphere of love, you also learn to receive love. But if you don't grow in an atmosphere of love, then you don't learn to receive love. And you also do not learn to give love. So it seems to me that receiving love is the first key and the foundation for us to then give the return of that, which is to love others. And of course, while you are growing up from infancy onwards, there is this natural reciprocation that's an important part of the whole thing. So when you receive love, you give love. And it's like a flow, receiving and giving. Then you give me this topic, to love or be loved. And when we're older and we become more self-sufficient and we make decisions in life, generally speaking, people like to live in families. Most people like to have a life partner. They create children. It can be a large family or a small family. And then you have other circles of people that are part of your life that are very significant. Your circle of friends, people that you do different activities with, your hobbies. If you are a parent, then other parents who have similar concerns for children, and that may help you to have support in your work as a parent. Because you're not just a parent, you may work also, you may have your parents to take care of. There may be many things are there extra. And so your amount of love that needs to be extended can be quite demanding, which means you have to have a source. And I think what I really want to talk about today is this way of resourcing yourself and of knowing how to keep your inner fountain of love all the time sustained, so that the demands of life are able to be fulfilled. And if you don't do that, then you have a hard time fulfilling other people's expectations of your love for them. And also you will look for some people who can love you so that you can then have some love that you can extend to others. And one thing that we do learn about in spirituality, which I think is really very helpful and useful to know, and that is that at the present historical moment that we're all passing through, it is said that pretty much everyone is spiritually depleted. And spiritual depletion means that your resource, your inner resources, which include love, are also at quite a low level. And so if you experience that you just don't seem to have enough love to go around to all the people who want you to love them and care for them and validate them and think about them and remember their birthdays and all the things that they need in order to feel good, and they look to you as the provider of that, and you may feel that you just don't have enough, and so you look for a source to fulfill that. And if you look for a source in a person who's depleted, then they will not be able to give you what you anticipate from them. And they may even actually want to take from you although you came into connection with them because you thought that they will support you and love you and give you that extra energy, but they're too depleted. And in the world we live in, there is this myth and assumption and belief that all you need to do is to find someone to love you, and then everything will be fine. And so all the romance, all the novels and movies, and it's all about getting together with someone, consummating that love, and everything being wonderful as a direct result of that. But what we're finding is that this myth, this story, this fairy tale is not really the reality. But the problem is that we haven't really come up with a viable alternative that everyone is ready to accept and go away from that nice story and nice fairy tale that is passed from generation to generation to generation, and wake up to the fact that actually it's not really like that, but there's something else going on. And so one thing is we need to have a source which is endless, infinite, huge, gigantic, and there is no human being or dog or mountain or career or any of those things. They cannot fulfill your need for that energy of love and sustenance. I also call it sustenance because it is like a food for the soul. And it is really the soul that is depleted and empty and needing to have access to this source. And so in meditation, that's what we do. And meditation means to be able to go to the source, which is unending, and to commune with that source and regularly fill yourself so that there is enough to extend where you need to extend it, and that you also accumulate more. So that's easy to say, but then we also have to look at the practicalities of it. Because if we just say it and then we have a nice imagination about what that means, that may not be realistic. So therefore, we need to go into some details about it. So the first thing to understand, of course, is that everyone is a spiritual being who is operating through a physical body, which could be young or old or male or female or different colors, different races, different cultures. But whatever it is, the being who lives and loves and is loved is a spiritual being. And love is an energy of the soul. And it is expressed and felt in different ways in the mind, in the heart, in relationships, in so many different ways. But it is a matter of the soul itself. And so love is the flame of the soul, the energy that makes life meaningful and worth living. And this is what everyone wishes for and wants, not only for themselves, but for everyone else. But the problem is depletion. And I'm using this word depletion, but I think a lot of people don't really realize that this is an issue, spiritual depletion, because you don't hear about it in the media, you don't hear about it in school or anywhere really. But it is the case, as far as I'm concerned, that study of spiritual matters invariably brings you to this conclusion that the problem, everybody's problem, is spiritual depletion. But there is another problem together with that problem. And that problem is indebtedness. And so when you're in debt, it makes you feel worry. And it makes you feel that pressure and struggle. And every so often, when there is indebtedness, and this happens a lot in relationships, people will express to each other, you're supposed to make me happy. For example, you might hear this expression that, in this relationship, you are in this relationship with me because you have to make me happy. And then the other one will say, yeah, exactly. You have to make me happy. So this means that there is this feeling that the other person is obligated to give you their energy. And the other person or people will say, no, you are obligated to give me your energy. So there is this, like a demand for energy from each other, which begins as attraction. And it's all very beautiful. And then after a while, it turns into the opposite and becomes a cause of conflict, bitterness, and so on in relationships. And that happens whether it's parents and children or between spouses or any of the various different relationships that we have. It can happen in friendships. It can happen in professional relationships. And it leads to this feeling of disappointment, betrayal, that, I didn't sign up for this. Why is it like this? It shouldn't be like this. And we become very critical of circumstances. And all of this is to do with the fact that the soul is really depleted in terms of that energy of love. And so the first thing that I would suggest is that we need to include in our life time to fill the self with spiritual energy, and that has nothing to do with other people. That is just me filling myself from that source beyond, which is the supreme being, the divine. It is not coming from the material world. It comes from a higher realm, a higher power, which is there, but people are not so knowledgeable about how to access it and what you have to do to make sure that the channel remains open, that you can drink from that flow of love. And if there is something that blocks it or stops it, you need to understand what happened. How did this happen? And it has very much to do with this aspect of indebtedness. And another word for that is karma or karmic accounts or karmic debt or karmic obligation. So when we start to learn about spiritual matters and we learn about how to think of the self as fundamentally a spiritual being who's operating in a material world, So we need to really make that very firm and very clear for ourselves that that is the reality. I'm a spiritual being and I'm in this material world interacting with other spiritual beings. And my action, if it's not based on love, I will get into debt. And if you don't have very much love, then a lot of the things that are done, the interactions between ourselves and other people, are for the purpose of getting. Love is giving. And when you don't have enough love, then you're hungry. And so you desire that energy of love. So when you see a person that seems interesting, attractive, beautiful, you resonate well with that person, and you think, I love this person, but behind this expression, I love this person, is I want this person to love me because I need to be loved. And so it compromises your thought that you love this person because you don't actually love this person like that. You are extending energy and that's it. No, you want something back because interaction between people is give and take. So ideally, in terms of looking at the laws of spirituality, looking at the laws of karma, when you come into a relationship with another human being and you want to create a long-term relationship, a family, whatever it has to be, but you have to understand sufficiently about love, about what is needed, so that the give and take between one another remains equitable. But because there are outstanding accounts of obligation, of debt between spiritual beings, between souls, you may be drawn to someone. There's this magnetic attraction that draws you to someone, which is because of an outstanding karmic debt. And so that brings you together with that person. And then the circumstances create situations where if you're in debt to the other person, things will happen where you have to pay, you have to give more than you receive. And it can be the other way around. The other one is in debt to you, so they will be giving you much more than you give back, because the nature of the laws of karma is that all of these discrepancies in the equilibrium of relationship need to be brought back to balance. So the law of karma is an energy that brings balance into human relationships. And so we need to gradually grasp this and see how it's playing out in our relationships. So if a person is doing good quality spiritual practice, good quality meditation, they're absorbing a good amount of energy, and that energy can be used to fulfill your obligations of relationship that you have. It can be used to give special care. Someone needs, you have extra, you can give extra care. Also, whenever a debt comes up for payment, you get into a situation and you recognize, oh, I owe, and it will need me to give some energy for that. And then you have enough to give, because if you don't have enough, you'll experience suffering. And nobody wants to suffer. You don't want to suffer in relationships. You don't want to suffer in any way, but especially a lot of people do experience suffering in relationships and they don't really know how or why it happened like that. And the more we study about spirituality and this laws of karma, laws of spirituality, the laws that govern human interaction, the clearer we are about what's happening. And we can read between the lines, we can see behind the veil of appearances to the realities that lie behind it. And then we are able to respond appropriately to the call of time and the requirements of circumstances. So these two things are important. The other thing that I think is very important is to really get a good sense of mutual benefit. Because when you enter into a relationship, you're discovering the person and discovering the energy that's going on and how close or how far or what's happening. But it's very important to give yourself a personal ethical policy that if someone does something to you, you will reciprocate in kind to keep the balance. If someone wants something from you, you will give, but then, if they keep wanting and without reciprocating, the balance is going to go out of balance. And so then you need to hold back, because the most important thing for success in relationships is to make sure that everything is balanced and you have like a social contract. And most people don't sit down and write a contract of their relationships. That's rare. Some people do. But there is a contract which is to do with the nature of the relationship. Like there's an unwritten contract of the obligations of a parent. If you have a child, it brings certain obligations which will last for a long time, and you can't really check out of that, because if you do, you go into debt. So you need to understand obligations, responsibilities, and you also need your freedom. So I think a very important thing is to put a number one priority that I must take the time to fill myself with so much energy from the divine source that I do not look for that kind of energy from any human source or any objects or any career or anything, because none of these things will give me what I need. They will pretend to, they will make out that they will do that, but I must not be deceived. So this is very important, because all of these support systems are actually insufficient, inadequate, and eventually you get in trouble when you depend on someone or something that you're actually not supposed to depend on, even though everybody believes that you're supposed to. But from the angle of spiritual study, this is something we begin to really realize, that do not have these expectations, do not depend, because you will get disappointed. But you can depend on truth, you can depend on wisdom, you can depend on that source, but you need to figure out what is your relationship with that source, so that the channel doesn't get blocked or closed. You need to make sure that your interaction with that source is also karmically correct. And a lot of people don't really think about that. But as we study spiritual matters, we begin to realize that, you have a relationship with yourself, very important. You have a relationship with other people. Some are very strong, some are not so strong, some are very close, some are a little distant, but you have a relationship where there is give and take, where there is obligation, responsibility, and rights. And this all has to be balanced. And we have a relationship with the planet. Now, everybody is very aware that we have problems, which we call climate change. But the relationship of humanity with the planet has been, the planet has been very generous, but humanity has maybe exploited it, wrecked it, ruined it, trashed it, whatever it has been. But we got ourselves into trouble, and it's very, very difficult to really do anything about it, although a lot of people have many proposals and plans. But it has reached a very difficult situation. And so it's a very interesting circumstance that forces us to be face to face with my relationship with nature, with the planet, has been maybe not quite right. Certainly humanity as a whole, not quite right. And so if you don't love the world, if you don't love the planet, you will not take care of it. You'll just take. And when you just take, that's not called love. That's called exploitation. And you will pay some form of suffering, some kind of deprivation, because the law of karma has to work out and equalize everything. So that is there. And then our relationship with the divine. So I think a lot of people, they really don't know how to think about that relationship. What is the divine, and is there a relationship? How do you know there's a relationship? What does it mean? It's all quite unclear. But definitely there is a relationship. And it is connected with love. You see, if you love the divine, if you love truth, you will make that a priority in your life, to live by truth, to live by honoring the divine and what the divine stands for, so that you in some way are reflective of that. And this is going to keep the channel open when there is that love for God, for the divine, for the supreme being. There is a reciprocal response. As much as you love, that much you will receive. And so this is why I think, in conclusion, our subject, to love or be loved, I would definitely fall down on the side of it's more important to love. Because if you love, you will be loved. And sometimes you may love, and those who you love don't reciprocate. And then when that happens, the relationship will basically fizzle out, because it gets out of balance. You give and they don't give back, even if you don't expect anything. But if the relationship goes out of balance, it will go to a certain point, and then you can't give anymore. It's like it stops. And they're not able to receive anymore. So there's a natural mechanism. And this is why, ideally, you want to keep it as mutually beneficial. And when you study spiritual materials, you learn about this. So you start to introduce this into your significant relationships, your relationship with the planet, and you start to think about your relationship with the divine also in this way. In order for you to be really filled with a huge resource of inner love, you need a lot of energy to develop that. And so you start off without much, but you give in your relationship with the divine and you open up that flow, it's going to increase. And when you are generous in your relationship with other people, with the planet, with life, it naturally will reciprocate. So this is a very important thing to understand, this law of reciprocity, and to keep yourself in that. And then you will find that the flow flows well and it doesn't block. So these are a few thoughts, and let me invite you to sit with me for a moment for meditation, and then we can discuss a little bit with myself and Elizabeth, and you may have some questions or comments. But let's just take a moment to sit quiet and think about loving. And first of all, we have to go inside, deep inside the self, the heart. The heart, not so much the heart here, but deeper than that. The core of your being, the heart of your spirit. This is where your love lives. And the soul is made of love, purity, inner power, stillness, beauty. Love is a powerful energy of the soul. And why you do what you do is because of love. First of all, you love yourself. You must find yourself. To find the self deep within, make contact with the self, know the self, and feel how much love you have, how much love you are. And of course, it is something to grow, something to amplify, to become vast as the universe. Feel your love. And also know that you have used a lot of that energy over time, and you need to be replenished. There is space in your being to grow that heart. There are wounds in the heart. There are shadows of disappointments and betrayals, corners of emptiness. Open your heart and see the beauty and the scars. It is like that. And take your mind up above. Your mind and your heart. Carry this beyond the everyday world to the world of light, to a region where you find the ocean of love, vast depth of feeling, oceanic, beautiful, pure love. Radiating from an infinitesimally tiny point, the source, the one, the greatest love, unending, a huge wave of love comes to you. Enters your being and fills you, floods you with light and love and peace. A nurturing, beautiful love of the mother, father, friend of the soul. Just take that in deep. And feel your heart expanding and growing. Radiating feelings of love out into the atmosphere. And then gently let yourself come back to the here and now, the everyday world. Feel that freshness, that readiness to extend your generosity as needed. Om Shanti. Thank you. So, Elizabeth.
Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. We are friends, right? There's a lot of love between us since years, yeah?
Long time. I feel I've had many lives in this one life. And we grow from each other, and we've watched each other sort of metamorphose. And I think that's where real love comes in, the allowing others to grow. And it's interesting. Forgiveness is such an intricate player. I really appreciated what you had shared. And it was interesting because I'd get a question and then you'd answer it, freedom, and how my question would be, the experience is delightful and the meditation was very calming and you felt safe. And to be open is quite vulnerable. And if I have aspects that I want to protect, and perhaps I've survived some toxic relationships. And so perhaps if we had some insights about navigating through difficult relationships to know where my karma ends and where's theirs begin, what am I obliged to in a relationship? When do I know that, hey, I think it'll be a better idea, to move on, when it would be better for both to move on. So I just thought if you could just address that a little bit. And I know it kind of falls into addictions and things like this. How can we be sensitive to that? How would we know the balance?
Well, to me, I think it's all about getting skilled in making sure that the relationship is balanced and that it's not one-sided, because it gets toxic when there is manipulation. And I think it's very, very important to be very clear about who you are, because in a toxic relationship, one will diminish the other, and the other will make the other one too big, and this already creates a great imbalance. Where there is fear, someone may be very aggressive and then the other one is tiptoeing around to try to protect themselves, and it becomes very, very dysfunctional. And all of this is a sign of karmic account. But there's two things that I think is quite interesting to segregate. One is there's a karmic account which put you into that situation. That's one thing. But the other is different. And that is that, you look at your circumstances as part of your school. The circumstances have lessons. And you may be yourself not completely balanced. I mean, most people are not completely balanced at all. And you may have some weak points, a little bit heavy over here, too light over there, and you need to get balanced. And the aim of spiritual practice is a perfectly balanced character, but we don't start off like that. So we will come in situations where we are under duress, not because we owe and have to suffer for some karma, but because we need to be strengthened in a certain area. Mm-hmm. And there is a process of strengthening that happens when you find yourself in a situation where you respond to that situation from the weakness of your character instead of from choosing a position of strength, which is required in that situation. And so, it's much useful, very important to see how these difficult situations can only be there so that you can be strengthened in an area which needs strengthening. And once you've got it right and you've come into your power, and then you set the necessary boundaries and you use the different powers according to need, and you will stand up for yourself, you will assert yourself, you will not abuse your power, You will understand the game, because there's always a lot of games going on, and you will be skilled in action. And this is a very interesting expression. It comes from the Bhagavad Gita, a description of yoga. Yoga is skill in action, and action means the give and take in relationships. So all of it is there specifically to enable us to be balanced and skilled, and get our weaknesses sorted out so that we are not handicapped by them.
Thank you. That feels freedom even in that, to position yourself in that way so that you don't feel, I don't want to say prey to negative impacts. And so you need to, I hear powers, you need powers, and you need to, that this is an opportunity for learning. That's very nice. How I can grow, how I can become strong. So thank you. And in keeping a balance, sometimes, Sister Denise, we don't know that why should I wait till the crash happens, till there's an explosion in a relationship? Or how can I be sensitive to the imbalance? Could you give some indicators that could help guide us when, maybe this is out of balance, that I'm buying into something, or you could even say an addictive kind of pursuit. And then of course, how could I nourish that? How could I put it back into balance? Just a few indicators.
You sometimes say this expression to yourself: I know better, but I did it, And so if you cannot act on what you know, but get pulled into some other behavior that you shouldn't do, but you did it anyway, that's really shows you that you gave away your power, or that you didn't recognize yourself, and you behaved according to some reaction to some trauma, or you had some toxic training that disempowered you, that you it's right to do something, but you doubt, and so you don't do it, and you betray yourself. Then you get taken advantage of, and you're not enough assertive. Or there's the opposite situation where you are too assertive and insensitive, and then other people are made to suffer. So these are indicators of imbalance. And I think another one, which is quite good to check yourself with, is someone plays a shot and it's negative. You take it as a negative thing, and it puts you out of balance. And so when you accept something negative, let it penetrate, let it get to you, and let it destabilize you, it means that you haven't played the shot as it needs to be played. Like tennis, you have to return the shot. And a lot of people get confused about this. And part of it is because of this mysterious thing called politeness. It's not polite to stand up for yourself. Excuse me, who said you must stand up for yourself? It's not polite to talk back. Well, there are times when you need to talk back, but it doesn't mean that you have to be rude. So, the conventions that people are taught in many cases are very disempowering, and they prevent a person from functioning properly. And so they need to be sort of identified, because it becomes really negative habits where either you're negative or you allow something negative to happen to you. And this makes sure that there is an imbalance in the world. And I think that the purpose of spirituality is to flag up imbalances that are kind of like institutionalized imbalances and biases and skews, so that we get a different type of perception and a different kind of consciousness, which creates a different kind of culture. And that is a huge deal. So we have to do it in baby steps. And the things that I mentioned, first of all, of like not doing things you know better than to do that, but you did it. So you catch yourself and say, analyze yourself now. How did what did I buy into that made me do something that I know better than to do that? You see, because there's some cause of it. There's some kind of, I can call it training or induction into life, you see, because people are trained to be something that they're not. And then all in the name of good behavior, but it backfires, I think, in a lot of cases. So we have to really rethink all these things. And sometimes also you have to set limits and boundaries and actually negotiate a relationship. And then you have a balanced relationship. It never starts off balanced if you really work through everything, which means you'll be willing to do the work. If someone you feel is so, good and a person of integrity that you really want to put in the effort to create a really good balanced relationship, it's constant negotiation, load of work, and you get something beautiful at the end of it. And you also come into your power. So that is very worthwhile to do.
Thank you. Relationships do go through these phases, don't they? There's a sort of a projection of seeing potential in the other. Whatever the relationship, even the job. And then the projection fades, or the dream fades, and then you're left with the opportunity of what I call real love. And I loved how you mentioned that you have to begin developing the relationship, and nothing starts out perfect. Yes. I'd like to open up this aspect about love, because they say, Sister Denise, that love heals. I mean, I've seen you grow, and I guess I've admired your courage and strength to face oneself and to get that energy flowing, so that I don't stagnate and I don't block. And for me, healing means flow. So if you could perhaps shed a little bit of your take on love and healing.
Well, as you speak, I'm remembering one of the organizations in Tiburon, which is working with cancer in young people, and their motto is "Love is letting go of fear." And I think that a fear of being hurt, fear of being exposed, fear of being diminished or mocked, or any of those things makes a person hold back and hold in, and sometimes it becomes an instrument for physical illness, mental illness, emotional disturbances. But you have to be, I think, brave and willing to be vulnerable and face things. And that is also a kind of love. I think love and courage are connected, because it takes courage to love, because people want guarantees, or I will love you if you love me first, or if you love me back, or there's these conditions. And this is why a lot of people talk about unconditional love, but then it's never quite clarified what they mean by that, and it gets all out of order because of that. But to love, say, okay, this is me, this is how I interact with the person, with generosity, with attention, with care, and without expecting anything in return. And so one thing is not to expect anything in return. And then the other thing is sometimes what you get in return is something totally the opposite. You might get abused, you might get something really nasty. And there you have to put some boundaries and say, okay, well, this is not healthy. Mm-hmm. And so you have to negotiate what's going on here. And I think it's also very important to be able to make the decision that you may love somebody, but you're not prepared to be in a abusive relationship. Because if you find yourself in an abusive relationship, you have to love yourself more than what you think is loving the other person, and you have to be willing to put the brakes on and take care of the self first, because otherwise it's not doing anybody any good at all. And then you have to heal from that. And this love for the self is a very, very important thing. To be attentive on your value, and to, as far as possible, make yourself as a self-sufficient person who is receiving that flow and who can express and give out. And whether the reciprocation comes or doesn't come, it's not a condition of your being you. But you also have to look after yourself around that, so that you don't accept to enter into an abusive relationship, because a lot of people do get into abusive relationships because of, they think, well, I have to love indefinitely and no matter what. But there are lines, you see, that you have to draw. And the healing of the soul and the healing of the mind and heart and everything are, I think, very much connected with your relationship with the divine, because the divine is a source of wisdom, not just only a source of the feeling of love, but when you receive wisdom from a divine source, that is also love, because it empowers you, it educates you, it makes you clear about how to take care of yourself in a world that's sometimes really very crazy. And to heal from your own confusing behavior, or this toxic way that sometimes people get raised, or different traumas or whatever. There's a lot of healing goes on. And I think that if you are a person who has come through and in a way healed yourself by developing this powerful relationship with truth and with the divine source, and with getting easy with people, regardless of how they are. Everybody's different, and then I think you can be an instrument, because you're you're balanced, you see, and then you're visibly balanced. And so that can also be an instrument for other people getting healed who are around you. Because I think that the work that a person does on themselves, which other people see, it kind of works on them as well. And gives them the inspiration and the opportunity to do their own healing. So it's very much to do with being part of a greater whole, you know?
Yeah, I was wanting to kind of interject earlier because you had hit on something that, and that was how the relationship or the object of the love shouldn't define you. Yeah. And somehow I feel you were naturally explaining how to love oneself. You were just kind of going through the steps, but then when you came to that sort of, I guess, juncture in a relationship, in that balance, that whole way of balancing, that the other person should not define who I am. I need to know who I am.
Oh, yeah.
And to really, and then you moved on to how important it is to develop that relationship with God. And Joanne was asking, how do I know I have a good relationship with God? And would this not bring benefit in my relationships? This relationship with the divine. How do I know I'm having that optimal relationship with God?
Well, you're reminding me of a conversation that I had when I was just starting out in my spiritual practice. And this was a conversation with Daddy Janki, who so many of us know and love. And I said to her, Daddy, I'm absolutely sure I do not love God. And she looked at me and she laughed and she said, nonsense. You love God enormously. I said, no, I don't. I don't feel anything. And she said, it's not about that. Look at what you're doing. What you're doing, for the task of God, the purpose of God, the study of God, etc., that's love. And I think it's just really important for people to get the point that love is not a feeling, but it is why you do what you do. And that's very solid and stable. And of course, people like to have the warm, fuzzy feeling and all of that, but that is not really love. Those are feelings are very ephemeral, and they come and go. And sometimes people absorb all the feelings of everything and everyone that's all around, and you become like a sponge and you get really contaminated. It's not a good idea. You got no boundaries. Love is to do with intention, purpose, motivation, and it reveals the quality of person that you are, the nobility, the love for the world, a love for God. It is to do with what kind of person you are and why you do what you do, what's important, and priorities, this type of thing, more than feeling.
Mm-hmm. I totally understand, Sister Denise, not to be, I don't know, lovey-dovey and mushy and all of that, because it doesn't feel balanced. And I can see where I've shifted for myself, that to use that, I didn't want to block it though. I didn't think that was accurate. but that if I looked at that mechanism of that feeling or that sensation as emotional intelligence, that helped me a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But I need that ability to be able to detach from the experience. It shouldn't, again, come back to the experience shouldn't define my self-worth.
You can experience a very powerful and beautiful feeling and make a lot of assumptions on the basis of it, about how that feeling came, where that feeling came from, all of these things.
Mm-hmm.
And then you will assume that it's always going to be there, or that it should be there, or whatever. And it isn't, you see, it's sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we can do well to shift from being emotional to being sensitive to something that I call sensibility, which is, I think it corresponds to this Greek idea that you have in spoken about by Plato, that there is eros,
Mm-hmm.
which is all the ecstasy and agony of love affairs. And then there is philos, which is love according to principles and values and doing good action and good quality relationships. And then there's another level, which is logos, which is to do with a very, very refined and pure a connection, which is really your connection with the divine. And then you become a little more divine yourself. And what people ultimately want is they want to experience the love of God. Because the experience of the love of people is very good until it isn't. And then it creates this desire, oh, I want to experience the highest level of love. And that corresponds to this word logos. But people are stuck up or stuck down in eros. And this actually blocks the soul from going to that higher level and receiving that very, very refined flow of energy, which is also a feeling, but it's not a gross feeling. It's very, very subtle and pure and beautiful, and not, like a tsunami. It's more like something transcendent,
Mm. What would be nice to hear is, how can we build a community of healthy interaction, of love, that synergy within a community? And not everyone's ready to be there, but we've seen it with Dadi Janki creating that within a gathering.
Well, I think that the exercise of building consensus is very good for this, because every so often in a community there are quite deep rifts and disagreements which can break it apart. And when something like this is noticed, then the leadership or someone has to take the leadership position and say, okay, we got to sit down and sort this out and work this through, and not leave the circle until we've done it. And that is a lot of work, but it's key and crucial to restoring the harmony. And so to sort of insist on that is actually a great act of love.
Mm. Yeah, it takes a lot of courage, because I know for myself, it's like, oh, it'd be easier to just pretend it didn't happen.
People do that, but there's no shortcut.
No. And to play that role of mediator, you really have to be fair. To mediate that energy, if there's a blocked energy within the gathering, and to mediate so that they trust, to build that trust. How does one build that kind of trust?
Well, you're part of it. You can't be outside the circle. You're part of the circle, and you're just as implicated as everyone else. You know, you may play the role of mediator just to get it going, but then it runs itself, and there's no need for a mediator. But still, you know, the more experienced you are, the better. You know, there was a very interesting film called 12 Angry Men, which was made in the 50s. It's very important because it shows what one person did to get all the others. This was a jury deliberating a murder case, and 11 of them were certain that this accused was the murderer, and one said, no, there is doubt. And just if you watch that film and you just see what they go through, is a very, very good expression of a person's love for truth and justice. Gave them the courage and the power to stick with it until what really needed to happen, the truth, came through. So I think there's a connection with, like you said before, love and healing, but love and truth, and these are all connected. And it requires attention, insistence, and that it was sometimes just the only one on one side and everybody else is on the other side, but yet it has to be done because of arriving at what's right.
Sister Denise, thank you so much. This is a tricky topic, and I really appreciate how you took us through the steps. Blessings and peace for all. Om Shanti.